And we're back with the road to 2300 on chess.com. My opponent plays d4, we have the black pieces, and against d4 and the queen's gambit setup, we go for the Rogozin. I usually go with this setup instead of, after knight c3, going knight f6, because then white can take and go in this queen's gambit declined. And I'm not a big enjoyer of this line. Also, white hasn't committed the knight to f3 yet, so white can potentially go f3, e4. That's why I go bishop b4, bishop d2, already slight. I wouldn't call it inaccuracy, I would call it rather like not the most ambitious move. Knight f6, preparing castles, and knight f3. Now we're back in the Rogozin setup where we basically, white just played on the fifth move bishop d2 instead of the main moves bishop g5 or queen a4. And, well, in Rogozin, you frequently take on c4, especially if white hasn't committed the e-pawn, hasn't moved the e-pawn yet. And, well, my opponent wants to. It's like this kind of tricky thing of the Rogozin. You think if black takes on c4, and if you're a queen's gambit player, white black takes on c4 means you can go with the center, but you can't. I take the knight, and I take the e-pawn, and now I'm just up a clean pawn, and I'm not up any pawn. I won the e-pawn, which means I have more central control. Now I trade the knight for the bishop, so I eliminate the bishop pair from white. So we have both light square bishops and a knight, which means I can I don't have to worry about like opposite color bishop dynamics. I'm going with b6, fianchetto the bishop, and preparing c5. I want to play c5 at some point, create an isolated pawn, attack the isolated pawn, win this isolated pawn, win a second pawn, win the game, GG. Knight g5, trying to initiate some sort of an attack on the king side, and I just ignore this completely and tell the knight to move. And now I go for c5. The engine, not a big fan. My idea was after takes to go queen d5, knight f4, and take on c5, and have this pawn as my target. But yeah, it's, as I said, such inaccuracies is not really a huge deal as long as I don't blunder huge positionally, or blunder pieces or pawns. I'm quite content with my play. We have now queen g5, threatening some sort of checkmate or like attacking, and eyeing the queen. Knight c6, attacking the d4 pawn. Bishop e4 is pinning the knight, and if I don't do something against the pin, white can maybe play rook c1 and exert some pressure. Yeah, now we trade queens, and I play f5. The idea of f5 was potentially not a good move because I leave the e6 pawn pretty vulnerable. The idea was to force white to do this, and now play bishop against knight and against this pawn. And here is like a move that's like really not good. He could have done this and go into this rook endgame where he controls the open files and my rooks are looking kind of stupid. defending these pawns. This would have been drawing according to the engine, but I think the knight is really good attacking the e6 pawn, and not trading this knight off, I think also quite a sensible decision from my opponent. But yeah, after after b4, I think he should have traded, because now I can blockade the c file and gang up on this pawn while my bishop still defends the e6 pawn. And now he tries to sacrifice the pawn and open up and get some activity, but he just doesn't get any activity. I take the pawn. Now I have a passed pawn. I will create a second passed pawn on the queen side. These two pawns will create a passed pawn against this one pawn. I'm trying to attack this pawn, and here I didn't want to see something like knight c5 land, which maybe could blockade a lot of squares from me. So I traded my bishop against the knight, and now, well, I need to get my pawn through, and here is where I create the passed pawn, and from here on out it's trivial win. I trade rooks, I take the a pawn, and yeah. Here's here's nice endgame technique. If I didn't have the e pawn but a g pawn, and a g pawn, this would be a draw, because we can try to set it up. So leave myself with a g pawn, something like this. Here I still have the trick, but I'm just quickly trying to set this up. Yeah, this is what I wanted to set up. This endgame is actually a draw. Of course, I did a lot of mistakes coming to this position, but in this position, Black can't do any progress, because I can't move this pawn. He will just keep his king on this square, and he can just move the rook as he pleases. And as soon as my only winning idea would be to approach the rook, and as soon as my king defends the rook, the pawn, so my rook could theoretically move, he'll just give a million checks. You just need to watch out that, like here in this position, to not give a check, because then I could go king a7 and prevent the rook from going back to the a file. But as long as you don't blunder this, you go something here, Black can't really do any progress. And if Black tries to step up to defend the pawn, you just give checks and go back. And Black can't do any progress. If Black had an f pawn, so imagine this pawn here, I could just run the f pawn, and the king can't stay on these two squares. These two squares are the drawing squares, because if I can force the king to move, because if the king goes to the f2 square, there's a trick which you've probably seen a lot. It's this move, and now I'm queening on the next move if you don't take. And if you take, I have this skewer. This skewer would be pretty bad. This skewer, and I win the rook. So the king needs to stay on, for this to be a draw, the king needs to stay on h2 or g2. But if I have an h pawn or g pawn, I can't do any progress because the king will just stay blockade the pawn. But if I have an f pawn, I can just move the f pawn through, and if the king takes or moves, tries to blockade this pawn, I have this rook h1 trick. Of course, you also can't go to, if I do a move, you can't go here because I give a check, I queen, while the rook defends the queen. Yeah, and if the rook was not behind the pawn, then I could just give a check and win queen with check. But since the rook is behind, the rook would take the queen. So yeah, that's I think it's interesting. I think that's the rook endgame you should know, because if you know this rook endgame, you can sneak some points. Like trying for such a position where black has the rook in front of a pawn. Here, that's the position. Like where black has the rook in front of a pawn and a j pawn or an h pawn. Because if you know this position is a draw and you know how to draw it, and your opponent may not know this is a draw, then you can like try to get such a position. Your opponent will gladly take it because he thinks he's up 2 pawns, he's really winning, but he's not winning. So yeah, that's probably going to gain you a few rating points. And yeah, so I managed to avoid this. After rook takes a1, my opponent decided to resign, which I thought could have already been done in a position like this, but my opponent didn't think so. So yeah, I won one nice game. Nice Rosen. It's just a different structure than the Queen's Gambit players are used to, so you can quickly surprise them with this weapon, with this opening, and get good positions pretty fast. Also, this is a solid opening, so it's not like you're risking anything playing the Rosen. So yeah, hope you enjoyed, and see you tomorrow. Bye bye.